I grew up on a quiet street in a small town where everyone knew each other, but no one knew me like Emily, the girl who lived right next door. From the moment we were old enough to walk, our lives were intertwined. Summers meant riding bikes until the sun slipped behind the trees. Winters meant building snow forts and daring each other to eat icicles off the roof. And every night meant whispered conversations through our bedroom windows that faced each other across the narrow strip of grass between our houses. Emily wasn't just my neighbor. She was the keeper of my secrets. My best friend. The person I thought would never, ever betray me. But that was before I trusted her with the truth about my dad. When I was little, I thought my family was normal. My dad was charming, funny, the kind of man who knew how to win people over instantly. To the neighbors, he was the guy who shoveled other people's driveways in winter, who grilled extra burgers on the 4th of July for anyone who wandered by. He was that dad, the one people envied. But at home, behind closed doors, things weren't like that. He wasn't the smiling man holding sparklers in the street. He was strict, angry, and sometimes he was terrifying. I never told anyone, except Emily. It started small. I'd sneak over to her house after one of Dad's outbursts and sit on the edge of her bed, pretending I wanted to watch a movie. Emily always knew something was wrong. She'd tilt her head and whisper, "What happened this time?" And I would spill pieces of the truth, careful not to give away too much. At first, I told her he just yelled a lot, that he lost his temper easily. But over the years, as our friendship deepened, I gave her more. The shouting, the broken plates, the slammed doors that made me flinch even when the wind blew too hard. She promised to keep it between us. She always promised. "You're safe with me," she'd say, her brown eyes locked on mine. "No one else will ever know." I believed her. Of course I did. She wasn't just my neighbor. She was my other half. But the thing about secrets is that they grow heavier the longer you carry them. And the truth about my dad was heavier than both of us put together. By the time we hit middle school, Emily and I were inseparable. We joined the same clubs, sat together at lunch, and walked home side by side every afternoon. People joked that we were like sisters, and in a way, we were. She knew me in ways even my own family didn't. She knew that I hated the sound of raised voices because it made me feel like the walls were caving in. She knew why I sometimes didn't want to invite her over when my dad was home. She knew I wore long sleeves in the summer, not because I was cold, but because I wanted to hide the marks on my arms from when I'd fallen or bumped into something. And I trusted her. Completely. I didn't realize back then how dangerous it was to hand someone your whole heart, your whole truth, without considering what they might do with it one day. It wasn't until 8th grade that things began to change. Emily started hanging out with a new group of friends, girls who wore matching bracelets and spoke in hushed whispers about boys and makeup and high school parties. I was still part of her world, but I could feel myself slipping to the edges. Sometimes, when I walked into the cafeteria, she'd be sitting with them, and there wouldn't be an open seat saved for me. She'd wave, smile a little too brightly, and then go back to whatever conversation I wasn't a part of. I told myself it was fine. People grow. Friendships evolve. We'd always be neighbors, and that meant she'd always be there for me. Right? But the distance kept growing, and with it, my fear. Because around that same time, things with my dad got worse. I still remember the night I told Emily the truth, the whole truth. We were sitting in her room, the glow of her bedside lamp casting shadows across the posters on her wall. I don't know what pushed me over the edge. Maybe it was the way she had laughed earlier in the day, surrounded by her new friends, like I wasn't even in the room. Maybe it was the fear of carrying my secret alone if she really did leave me behind. Or maybe I just couldn't hold it in anymore. So I told her everything. I told her about the night he threw a chair across the room because Mom had overcooked the chicken. I told her about the time he grabbed me by the wrist so hard I couldn't feel my fingers for an hour. I told her how I sometimes locked myself in the bathroom just to breathe without worrying what mood he'd be in. Emily sat there, wide-eyed, not saying a word until I was finished. Then she reached over, squeezed my hand, and whispered, I'll never tell anyone. I promise. You can trust me. And I believed her. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without feeling like the walls of my house were closing in. I didn't know that my best friend, the girl who had been my safe place for so long, was already changing. I didn't know that one day she would take my pain, my deepest secret, and use it in a way I never could have imagined. And I didn't know that it would destroy not just our friendship, but everything I thought I understood about family, trust, and the people who are supposed to love you most. Freshman year of high school should have been exciting. New classes, bigger hallways, new opportunities. For most kids, it was about reinventing themselves, shedding the awkwardness of middle school and stepping into something new. For me, it was about survival. By then, my dad's temper had become a ticking clock, unpredictable and exhausting. Mom walked on eggshells every day, trying to keep the peace. My little brother, Noah, hid in his room with his headphones on. And me? I carried the weight of all of it, silently, because Emily was the only person I had ever let in. But Emily was changing. She wasn't the girl who used to sneak Pop-Tarts into her room so we could stay up late talking. She wasn't the girl who once defended me on the playground when kids laughed at my hand-me-down sneakers. Now, she wore eyeliner, borrowed her sister's clothes, and moved through the halls with a confidence I couldn't recognize. She had new friends, friends who giggled too loud and looked at me like I was invisible. Still, I held on. She was my best friend. She had to be. For a while, we still had moments together, walking home after school, sitting on her porch steps with melting popsicles in the heat of September, pretending we didn't care about high school drama. But even in those moments, I could feel the cracks forming. She answered texts slower. She didn't invite me to hang out when her new friends were around. When I did catch her attention, it felt borrowed, like she was already halfway gone. And then came the party. It was late October, the kind of cool night where the air bites at your skin, but you don't mind because it feels alive. Someone from the sophomore class was throwing a Halloween party, and everyone was talking about it. I didn't expect an invite. People like me didn't get invited to things like that. But Emily did. And she wanted me to go with her. At first, I thought it was her way of pulling me back in, of reminding me we were still us. She showed up at my window the night before, holding a plastic shopping bag with a witch hat sticking out. "You're coming," she said, like it wasn't even a question. I wanted to say no. I hated parties. I hated the idea of being surrounded by kids who only knew how to whisper and judge. But she was my best friend. And she was looking at me the way she used to, like I mattered. So I said yes. The party itself was overwhelming. Music pounded so hard I could feel it in my chest. Kids were packed into the living room, their costumes ranging from clever to ridiculous. Emily disappeared almost immediately into the crowd of her new friends, leaving me clutching a plastic cup of soda and wishing I had stayed home. I wandered around, trying not to look lost. Eventually, I found Emily again, laughing too loudly at something a boy in a football jersey said. She barely noticed me until I tugged at her sleeve. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, of course," she said, smiling, but her eyes slid right past me. "Go have fun. I'll find you later." But later never came. By the time I left, I felt emptier than I had in months. I walked home alone, the witch hat stuffed into my bag, and crawled into bed still wearing my makeup. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized something that hurt more than anything. Emily didn't need me anymore. But I still needed her. That's why, when things at home got worse, I told her again. I told her about the night Dad punched a hole in the wall because Noah spilled juice on the carpet. I told her about how Mom cried in the bathroom with the water running so we wouldn't hear. I told her about the fear that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. She listened, but this time, something was different. She didn't squeeze my hand. She didn't promise to keep it between us. She just said, "Wow, that's a lot." And then she changed the subject. It stung, but I let it go. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Maybe it was too heavy. She was only 15 after all. But still, I had trusted her. I had handed her the most fragile part of me, and she had just brushed it aside. The first real crack came a week later. We were in the cafeteria when one of her new friends, Jessica, a girl with perfect hair and a cruel smile, looked at me and said, "So, is it true your dad's like crazy angry all the time?" The world tilted. I stared at Emily, my stomach dropping, but she just gave a little shrug, like it wasn't a big deal. "I mean, she told me herself," she said, laughing nervously. "It's not like it's a secret." But it was. It was my secret. The cafeteria felt too bright, too loud. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to crawl under the table and never come out. Instead, I forced a laugh, muttered something about people exaggerating, and excused myself to the bathroom where I locked myself in a stall and tried not to cry. When Emily came in a few minutes later, she acted like nothing had happened. "Don't be mad," she said, fixing her lip gloss in the mirror. "It just slipped out. They won't even care." But I cared. For the first time, I realized Emily wasn't just drifting away from me. She was taking pieces of me with her and giving them to people who didn't deserve to know. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, that she didn't mean it, that she was still my best friend. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. The glass between us had cracked, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I could already see the shards waiting to fall. And I had no idea that what came next would shatter everything completely. By November, everything felt different. Emily and I still walked home together sometimes, still shared inside jokes, still looked like best friends from the outside. But I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet every time she spoke. I didn't know if what I said to her in private would stay between us anymore, or if it would slip into the ears of her new friends the next day. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that she didn't mean harm. But the cafeteria incident replayed in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Jessica's smug smile, the way Emily shrugged like my pain was nothing. It stuck with me. And then came the moment I couldn't ignore. It was a Friday night, the first basketball game of the season. Our school's gym was packed with students, parents, and cheerleaders chanting from the sidelines. Emily had begged me to come, and I did, mostly because she sounded so excited. I thought maybe it could be like old times again. But the second I stepped into the bleachers, I knew something was wrong. Kids kept glancing at me, whispering behind their hands. When I finally found Emily, sitting near the front with her new group, she looked guilty the moment our eyes met. I slid into the seat beside her. "What's going on?" I asked. She gave me a too bright smile. "Nothing. Don't worry about it." But I couldn't ignore the way Jessica leaned over and whispered something into another girl's ear, both of them giggling as they looked straight at me. My stomach twisted. At halftime, I finally confronted her. We were standing near the concession stand, the smell of popcorn and sweat filling the air. "What did you tell them?" I asked. Emily shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't." She stopped, sighed, then muttered, "I might have said something, but it wasn't a big deal." My heart sank. "What did you say?" "That your dad, you know, gets really angry sometimes. And that he's kind of scary." I didn't mean for it to spread. The words hit me like a punch. She had taken the one thing I trusted her with, the thing that kept me up at night, the thing that made me feel like I couldn't breathe sometimes, and handed it over like gossip. "Emily," I whispered, my voice shaking, "that wasn't yours to tell." Her eyes darted around nervously, like she was embarrassed to be having this conversation in public. "You're being dramatic," she said. "I was just talking. They don't even care that much." But I cared. I cared more than anything. That weekend, it got worse. By Monday morning, half the school seemed to know. In the hallway, I heard someone mutter, "That's the girl with the psycho dad." Another kid whispered. I heard he threw a chair at her once. The rumors grew bigger, uglier, and more twisted every time they passed from one mouth to another. I felt like I was drowning. And through it all, Emily acted like nothing had changed. She waved to me in the halls, smiled at me in class, invited me to sit with her at lunch. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be. Every time I looked at her, I saw betrayal. The worst part? I couldn't tell anyone else. Not my mom. She was too fragile already, barely holding herself together. Not Noah. He was too young. And definitely not my dad, because if he found out people were talking, his anger would explode in ways I couldn't even imagine. So I stayed silent, and silence made me a target. One day after school, as I was pulling books from my locker, Jessica strutted up beside me. "So," she said loudly, making sure people around us could hear, "is it true your dad freaks out if you even breathe wrong?" I froze. She leaned closer, smirking. "What's it like living with a ticking time bomb? Do you have to wear body armor at dinner?" Laughter rippled through the hallway. My cheeks burned. I slammed my locker shut and walked away, but the sound of their voices followed me like shadows I couldn't outrun. That night, I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with anger and heartbreak. Emily was supposed to protect me. She was supposed to be the one person I could trust when the world felt unsafe. Instead, she had turned my secrets into weapons for other people to use against me. And the worst part? She didn't even see what she had done. The next day, I tried to talk to her. We sat on her porch after school, the autumn air crisp around us. "Why did you tell them?" I asked quietly. She frowned. "I didn't think it would matter. Everyone talks about their families. I just—" She hesitated, then said something that broke me. "I didn't think it was that serious. Not that serious." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and make her understand that it was serious, that it was my life, my safety, my family falling apart behind closed doors. But I didn't. I just sat there, my throat burning, and realized that the girl sitting beside me wasn't the same Emily I had grown up with. Somewhere along the way, she had changed. Or maybe I had just been blind to who she really was. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the years we'd spent whispering secrets through our windows, all the promises she had made to keep my truth safe. And I realized something terrifying. Once you give someone your secrets, you can't take them back. And Emily was holding mine like matches in her hand, ready to set fire to everything. By December, I wasn't just the girl with the angry dad anymore. I was the girl whose whole life had become a rumor. People didn't whisper as quietly now. They didn't even try to hide it. When I walked into class, conversations would pause. When I raised my hand, kids snickered. Even teachers started giving me those looks, the kind that were equal parts pity and curiosity, like they were wondering if the rumors were true. And through it all, Emily pretended nothing was wrong. She still waved at me in the hall, still invited me to sit with her, still came over to borrow notes or ask about homework. But every time I looked at her, I saw betrayal. And I couldn't stop wondering what else she had told people when I wasn't around. It all came to a breaking point the week before winter break. Mom was cooking dinner, spaghetti, her go-to when she was too tired to try anything else, when the phone rang. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and answered it, her voice cheerful at first, then confused, then sharp. When she hung up, her face was pale. "That was the school," she said, her voice trembling. They said someone reported concerns about your father." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "They said students have been talking. That your father might be abusive." The word hung in the air like smoke. Dad's chair screeched against the floor as he stood, his eyes narrowing. "Who's been saying that?" he snapped. His voice was low, dangerous. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. I don't know. But I did know. Of course I did. Emily. She hadn't just told Jessica and her little group. She must have told someone else. And now, it wasn't just whispers in the hallway. It had made its way into my home, into the one place I tried so hard to keep separate. Dad's jaw clenched. "If people think I'm some kind of monster, Then maybe they should come live here for a day and see how hard I work for this family. His voice rose, sharp and cutting. Ungrateful. All of you. Mom tried to calm him, placing a hand on his arm, but he yanked it away. If this ruins my job, if people start looking at me differently, you'll have no one to blame but yourselves. And then he stormed out, slamming the doors so hard the windows rattled. I sat there in silence, spaghetti growing cold on my plate, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. Noah looked at me, wide-eyed, too young to fully understand but old enough to know something was wrong. Mom pressed her fingers to her temples, whispering, "God, what are we going to do?" And all I could think was, Emily did this. She promised to keep my secret, and now it's not a secret at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Dad pacing downstairs, muttering under his breath. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. Every shadow looked like it might explode into anger. And all I wanted to do was march next door, bang on Emily's window, and scream at her. But I didn't. The next morning, she was waiting for me on the porch, her breath clouding in the cold air. She looked nervous, like she already knew. "Hey," she said softly. I didn't answer. I just shoved my hands in my pockets and started walking to school. She hurried to keep up. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. I stopped in my tracks and turned to her, my voice shaking. "Mad at you? My dad almost lost it last night because the school called. They said people are talking. You did that, Emily. You told them." Her eyes widened. "I didn't." She hesitated, then sighed. "Okay, I might have told Jessica more than I meant to. And maybe she told someone else. But I was worried about you. I thought people should know what's going on. You promised." I whispered, my throat tight. "You swore you'd never tell anyone." Her face softened. "I was trying to help." "Help?" My voice cracked. "Do you know what happens when people start asking questions? Do you know what my dad will do if he thinks I said something? You didn't help, Emily. You made everything worse." She flinched, but then her expression hardened. "I'm not going to apologize for caring about you. You can hate me if you want, but at least I'm not pretending everything's fine when it's not." I stared at her, stunned. The girl I had trusted more than anyone in the world was standing there, acting like she was the hero in this story, like breaking her promise was some kind of noble act. I walked away without another word, tears burning in my eyes. The rest of the day was a blur. Whispers in the hallways. Teachers pulling me aside with gentle voices, asking if everything at home was okay. I kept saying yes, forcing smiles I didn't feel, because the alternative was unthinkable. But the damage was done. My secret wasn't just mine anymore. It was public property, passed around like gossip, dissected by people who didn't understand. And Emily, the girl who had once been my safe place, was the one who had opened the door. That night, when I crawled into bed, I realized something I never thought I'd have to accept. Emily wasn't my best friend anymore. She wasn't even my friend at all. She was the person who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And if I didn't find a way to protect myself, her betrayal was going to tear my family apart. Winter break should have been a relief. No school, no whispers in the hallway, no Jessica mocking me when I walked by. But instead of peace, it felt like a storm cloud hanging over our house, ready to break open at any second. Dad was angrier than ever. He paced the living room, muttering about how people were trying to ruin his reputation. Mom was quiet, withdrawn, cooking and cleaning like she was afraid of giving him any reason to explode. Noah stayed in his room most of the time, the glow of his video games lighting up the cracks under his door. And me? I was drowning in guilt. Because even though Emily had betrayed me, even though she had turned my secrets into rumors, I was the one who had told her in the first place. I had handed her the matches, and she had set the fire. The night it all came crashing down started like any other. Dinner was tense, silent except for the scrape of silverware against plates. Dad asked about my grades, and when I hesitated too long before answering, his eyes narrowed. "Are you lying to me?" he demanded. No, I whispered quickly, my fork trembling in my hand. His voice rose, sharp and jagged. Don't think I don't hear what people are saying about me. That I'm some kind of monster. Do you know how humiliating that is? Do you know what that does to me? Mom tried to intervene. She didn't say anything, Mark. Don't defend her, he roared, slamming his fist against the table so hard the plates rattled. Noah flinched. I froze. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. That's when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the front door. Dad stiffened. Slowly, he stood and opened it. And there, on our porch, stood 2 people I never expected to see together, Emily and her mom. Emily's eyes darted to mine instantly, guilt written all over her face. Her mom's voice was firm. Mark, we need to talk. Dad's jaw tightened. About what? About what's happening in this house. The room tilted. My stomach dropped. I looked at Emily, silently begging her to stop this, to turn around and leave, but she just shifted nervously from foot to foot. Dad's face turned red. You think you know what happens in my house? You think you can come here and accuse me of something? His voice rose with every word, shaking the walls. Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands. Please, let's not do this here. But it was too late. Emily's mom took a deep breath. We've heard things. From Emily. From other kids at school. And if any of it is true, Dad's roar cut her off. Get out of my house. The sound made Noah start to cry. Mom pulled him close, her hands shaking. And me? I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. All I could see was Emily standing there, her face pale, her lips pressed together like she wanted to say something but couldn't. This was it. The moment everything I had tried to hide was laid bare. Dad? I whispered, my voice breaking. Please stop. He turned to me, eyes wild. So you've been talking about me? To her? To everyone? Tears filled my eyes. I didn't know what else to do. His face twisted, and for a second, I thought he might actually hit me. But then, something shifted. He looked around the room, the fear in Noah's eyes, the way Mom held him, the neighbors standing on our porch, and for the first time, I saw him hesitate. The silence stretched on forever. Finally, Emily's mom said quietly, We can help. But this can't go on like this. Dad didn't answer. He just turned, grabbed his coat, and slammed the door behind him, disappearing into the night. The house was silent except for Noah's soft sobs. I collapsed onto a chair, my body shaking. I had spent years carrying this secret, trying to protect my family, trying to survive. And now, it was all out in the open. Emily stepped forward, her eyes glassy with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never wanted it to get this far. I couldn't keep watching you go through this alone. For a long time, I couldn't look at her. All I could feel was the betrayal, the anger, the weight of everything she had taken from me. But underneath it all, there was something else too, relief. Because even though she had broken her promise, even though she had hurt me in ways I wasn't sure I could forgive, the truth was finally out. And maybe that was what I needed all along. The weeks that followed were messy. Social workers came. Teachers checked in. Mom finally admitted that she couldn't keep pretending anymore. Dad didn't come home for a long time, and when he did, it was only to pack a bag and leave again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But for the first time in years, the house felt quieter. Safer. As for Emily, things between us were never the same. We stopped sitting on each other's porches. Stopped whispering secrets through our windows at night. Our friendship, the one I thought would last forever, had been shattered. But sometimes, when we passed each other in the hallway at school, our eyes would meet, and for just a second, I saw the girl she used to be, the one who promised to keep me safe, the one who held my secrets like treasure. And maybe, deep down, I knew she had cared about me in her own way, even if it came at the cost of everything we once were. Because the truth is, Betrayal doesn't always come from people who hate you. Sometimes, it comes from the people who love you most. And sometimes, even when it destroys you, it also sets you free.